It's strange how a single moment can change everything you thought you knew. 1 second, you're living in the quiet predictability of your life. The next, you're standing at the edge of a line you never thought you'd cross. When Kyle, my stepson, opened my bedroom door without knocking that evening, I didn't think much of it at first. I was in the middle of changing clothes, and I assumed it was an innocent mistake, a teenager forgetting his manners. But the way his eyes lingered, the way he hesitated before retreating, left a ripple in the air that I couldn't ignore. Something shifted in that moment, though I couldn't put my finger on it. I told myself it was nothing. I closed the door, shook off the odd tension, and moved on. Or so I thought, because sometimes a door left ajar can reveal more than you're ready to see. My name is Laura, and for the last 6 years I've been married to David. We met in a way that feels almost cliché now, at a small bookstore where we both reached for the same novel. He was charming and disarming, a man with an easy smile and a steady presence that made me feel grounded. When he told me he had a teenage son, Kyle, from a previous marriage, I hesitated for a moment. I wasn't sure I was ready to be a stepmother, but love has a way of making you braver than you think you are. David's first marriage had been rocky, and Kyle had been caught in the crossfire. At 14, when I first met him, Kyle was withdrawn and guarded, his brown eyes clouded with mistrust. He didn't make it easy for me. Every smile I offered was met with silence, every attempt at connection brushed aside. But I understood why. His mother, Michelle, had left when he was just 10, her unpredictable nature leaving deep scars on the boy she abandoned. Over time, Kyle warmed to me, though our relationship was never without its challenges. I learned to navigate the minefield of teenage moods, offering support without overstepping. By the time Kyle turned 19 and started attending a local college, we had settled into a quiet rhythm as a family. He was polite and respectful, though not particularly open. Our home was a modest 2-story house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by fields that swayed gently in the wind. The air always carried a hint of the sea, salty and crisp, while the distant hum of waves provided a soothing backdrop. My bedroom, a sanctuary of soft beige walls and warm wooden furniture, overlooked the garden, where the light of the setting sun often painted everything in hues of gold and rose. That evening, the house was unusually quiet. David was working late, and I was alone in our room, the soft hum of a fan breaking the silence. I was halfway through unbuttoning my blouse when I heard the faint creak of the door. "Kyle!" I said, startled, clutching the fabric to my chest. He stood there in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the light from the hallway. His eyes, wide and hesitant, met mine before darting away. Sorry. I didn't know you were." "I should have knocked," he mumbled, stepping back and closing the door quickly. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding. It was a simple mistake, I told myself. But the unease in his gaze lingered, hanging in the air like an unfinished sentence. The days after the incident felt strange, as though an invisible thread had been pulled, unraveling something I hadn't realized was fragile. Kyle avoided me at first, barely speaking during dinner and retreating to his room as soon as he could. David, busy with work and unaware of the subtle tension, didn't notice. I told myself it was nothing, just an awkward moment that would pass. But then Kyle's behavior shifted. At first, it was small things, staying in the kitchen a little longer when I was cooking, offering to help with chores he usually ignored, lingering in the living room when I was there. I brushed it off as coincidence until one evening when David was working late. I was sitting on the couch, a blanket draped over my legs, flipping through a book I wasn't really reading. Kyle walked in, a glass of water in his hand. "You don't have to sit in here alone," he said, setting the glass on the table and sitting at the far end of the couch. "I'm fine, really," I replied, not looking up. "You've been quiet lately," he said after a pause. "Is everything okay?" The question caught me off guard. His tone was soft, almost concerned, but there was something underneath it, an edge I couldn't define. "I'm fine," I said again, keeping my voice light. "Just tired." He nodded but didn't move. The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally I stood, excusing myself with the pretense of needing to fold laundry. In the privacy of my room, I paced. Was I imagining things? Reading too much into his actions? He was young, still finding his way in the world, and maybe I was mistaking awkwardness for something it wasn't. But a part of me couldn't shake the memory of the way his eyes had lingered on me that evening. The next few days brought more moments I couldn't ignore. His compliments became more frequent, his tone carrying a weight that felt different. "You always look so nice," he said one afternoon as I was preparing lunch. "Thank you," I replied, my voice tight. "You know," he added, leaning against the counter, "Dad's lucky to have you. You're amazing." The words hung in the air, too heavy for casual conversation. I glanced at him, searching for any hint of playfulness or innocence, but his expression was earnest. "Kyle," I said carefully, "that's kind of you to say, but I think you should focus on finding someone your own age to compliment." His cheeks flushed, and he muttered something under his breath before leaving the room. I exhaled deeply, gripping the counter to steady myself. The tension reached a breaking point one evening when David was out of town. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when Kyle appeared in the doorway. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice hesitant. I turned, drying my hands on a towel. "What is it?" He stepped closer, his hands stuffed into his pockets. "I feel like things have been weird between us lately." I swallowed hard, keeping my expression neutral. "Weird how?" He hesitated, as if weighing his words. "I don't know. I feel like there's something unspoken between us." My pulse quickened. "Kyle, I don't know what you're talking about," I said firmly. "Yes, you do," he said, his voice low but steady. "I see the way you look at me. I know you feel it too." I froze. The weight of his words took another step closer. "I'm not a kid anymore, Laura. I know what I want, and Enough!" I snapped, cutting him off. "This is completely inappropriate, and you know it. Whatever you think is happening here, it's not. You need to stop this now." For a moment, he just stared at me, his face a mixture of defiance and hurt. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving me trembling in the middle of the kitchen. That night, I locked my bedroom door, my mind racing. How had things come to this? What had I done to make him think this was okay? Doubts and fears swirled in my head. But one thing was clear. The line he'd crossed couldn't be ignored. The following morning, I decided to confront Kyle. I couldn't let this fester any longer. Couldn't let the silence between us turn into something darker. David was due back that evening, and the last thing I wanted was for this situation to spiral out of control. I found Kyle in the living room, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "Kyle," I began, sitting on the chair opposite him, "we need to talk about last night." He set his phone down slowly, his posture stiffening. "I figured we might." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "What you said to me, it was inappropriate, and it crossed a line. I'm your stepmother. This family dynamic depends on mutual respect, and we can't." "Stop," he interrupted, his voice low. "Please, just stop pretending like you don't feel the same way." I blinked, stunned by his persistence. "Kyle, you're misunderstanding." "No, I'm not," he said, standing abruptly. His face was flushed, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You think I don't notice the way you look at me? The way you avoid being alone with me? You're scared of this, but it's real, Laura. I know it is." His words hit me like a slap. "This isn't about what I feel," I said, my voice trembling. "This is about boundaries, about trust, about everything we've built as a family. What you're saying is hurtful and wrong." He let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his hair. "You think I want to feel this way? You think I don't know how messed up this is? But I can't help it, Laura. I can't stop thinking about you." For a moment, I was at a loss for words. His confession was raw and unfiltered, a glimpse into the turmoil he was wrestling with. And as much as I wanted to dismiss it, to push it away, I couldn't deny the pain in his voice. "Kyle," I said softly, "I understand that you're confused, that you're going through a lot right now. But this isn't love. It's misplaced feelings, and it's not fair to either of us. He looked at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. How can you be so sure? How can you just decide what this is for me? Because I'm the adult here, I said firmly, standing to face him. And it's my responsibility to set the boundaries that you need, even if it's hard. I care about you, Kyle, but not in the way you want me to. I'm your stepmother. That's all I'll ever be. He turned away, his shoulders slumping as the weight of my words settled over him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The room felt suffocating, heavy with unspoken pain. Finally, he muttered, "I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air, tentative and broken. "I know this is hard," I said, my voice softening, "but you'll get through it. We both will." He nodded, but he didn't look at me. Instead, he left the room, retreating to the safety of his own space. As I stood there alone, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that the truth was out, that the weight of unspoken feelings had been lifted. But sorrow, too, for the damage it had done to our relationship, for the trust that had been fractured. I knew there was no quick fix for this, no way to undo the hurt we'd both experienced. But I also knew that the first step toward healing was setting clear boundaries and staying true to them. For Kyle, for David, for myself. In the days that followed, a fragile silence settled over the house. Kyle stayed in his room more often, avoiding even the smallest interactions with me. David, blissfully unaware, assumed it was just the moodiness of a young adult juggling college and family life. I didn't correct him. I considered telling David everything. It felt like the right thing to do, the honest thing. But the thought of the fallout, of the strain it would put on their relationship, on our marriage, made me hesitate. This was Kyle's burden to carry, and as much as I wanted to protect him, I couldn't shield him from the consequences of his actions forever. One evening, as I was folding laundry, Kyle appeared in the doorway. His eyes were red-rimmed, his posture slouched with the weight of something unspoken. "Laura," he said quietly, I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." I paused, setting down the shirt I was holding. "I appreciate that, Kyle. It means a lot to hear you say it." He stepped inside, leaning against the doorframe. "I think I let a lot of stuff build up, stuff I never dealt with after Mom left. And I guess I just projected it all onto you. You've been so kind to me, and I twisted it into something it wasn't." His honesty caught me off guard, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. "It takes courage to admit that," I said gently. "You're allowed to feel hurt, Kyle. But you also need to let people help you in healthy ways." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "I'm going to try. I just need some time." That night, as I sat alone in my room, I found myself reflecting on the complexity of human relationships. Love, in all its forms, could be beautiful and messy, healing and destructive. It had the power to bind us together or pull us apart, depending on how we navigated its delicate threads. Kyle and I had crossed into dangerous territory, but we had also managed to step back before the damage became irreparable. It wouldn't be easy to rebuild the trust we'd lost, but maybe that was the lesson in all of this, that healing is a process, not a destination. As I turned off the light, I thought about the choices we make and the lines we draw, not just for ourselves, but for the people we care about. And I hoped for both Kyle and me that this would be a turning point, a chance to grow stronger in the spaces where we'd once been broken.